They didn't even soften their tone. I was in the next room, folding my granddaughter's pajamas, when I heard my daughter-in-law, Catherine, say it plainly. "Don't include her. She'll just hold us back." I froze, my hands mid-fold. A pause. Then my son, my own son, didn't protest. He just sighed, a soft, weary sound of agreement. "You know how she gets," he murmured. My blood ran cold. Just last month, I had paid for their cabin upgrades from a cramped interior room to a balcony stateroom. It was my contribution to the family adventure, a gift I gave freely. Kate had smiled that tight smile of hers and said, "Eleanor, your company is plenty." Apparently, my company was welcome, but my presence was a complication. They were happy to take my money, but not my hand. I was the sponsor, not a guest. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the cruise confirmation in front of me, and then I picked up the phone. I wasn't just going to cancel. I was going to overshadow. "Hello," I said, my voice steady as stone. "I'd like to make a change to my booking. I'll be needing an upgrade. What is the most exclusive suite you offer?" I had paid the deposit a month ago, reserved my place when they first mentioned the cruise. They called it a family adventure, something Oliver and Chloe could cherish forever. I had even offered to contribute to the suite, and Kate had dismissed me with that strained smile of hers. "No need, Eleanor. Your company is plenty." Apparently, it was too much. I spent the rest of the morning moving on autopilot, helped Chloe find her book, made sure Ollie packed his swim trunks. They weren't malicious, my son and Catherine, just pragmatic. They had kept me involved in the arrangements, in a manner of speaking, asked if I preferred seafood or poultry, mentioned we would be docking in Street Thomas, but I now recognized it for what it was, politeness. They would let me join if I pressed the issue, but I knew they were hoping I wouldn't. I was their backup plan, the extra seat, the spare hand if someone felt unwell. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my checkbook and a strong drink I hadn't allowed myself in years. My cruise confirmation was on the counter. Balcony stateroom, third deck, beside the children's room. I gazed at it for a long time, then I picked up the telephone and dialed. "Hello, Celestial Voyages. Yes, I'd like to alter my current reservation." "No, I'm not reconsidering, but I wish to upgrade. What is the most exclusive suite you offer?" The woman on the line faltered. "Our chairman's suite, ma'am. It offers a private deck, a personal concierge, and access to premium dining." "I'll take it," she hesitated. "It's considerably more costly." "I'm 81, I said. "I've been pinching pennies and saving strings since Reagan was in office. I'll take it." She gave a nervous laugh and processed the modification. When she announced the final sum, I didn't wince. I provided my card details, confirmed my priority boarding, and ended the call. I sat in the stillness, fingers tight around the glass. So, this was how it felt to stop requesting space in your own family and simply claim it instead. I didn't inform them. Let them continue to think I'd be in Michigan, tending the garden and feeding the cat while they sipped cocktails on a sun deck. It worked for them, and for a change, it worked for me. 2 days before departure, Kate sent me a bright text. "We're getting so excited. The forecast is perfect. So lovely to see you this weekend." I didn't respond. Instead, I retrieved my suitcase from the hall closet, the fine one with the leather trim and smooth wheels. I packed methodically. 2 sundresses, my comfortable sandals, the navy jumpsuit I had never worn, deeming it too elegant for Sunday service. My husband's old linen fedora, the one he wore on our honeymoon in Bermuda, went in last. He would have adored this audacity. The morning of the cruise was clear. I wore white linen trousers, a soft rose-colored blouse, and my mother's pearls. At the terminal, I joined the priority check-in line. A young man in a blazer took my bags and smiled as he read my name on the passenger list. The chairman's suite, Miss Vance. Welcome aboard, Miss Vance. Not Mom, not Grandma, not Eleanor the obligation, just me. As the gangway reverberated beneath my shoes, I didn't glance back. My family wouldn't arrive for another 3 hours. By then, I would be sipping a crisp Sauvignon Blanc on a terrace large enough for a small reception while they queued for their buffet passes. Let the voyage begin. I was no longer pursuing them. The suite door closed behind me with a gentle click, and for a second, I simply stood there, letting the silence settle in. Suite 1501, the chairman's. I had never experienced anything like it, on land or at sea. A spacious room bathed in sunlight, cream-colored sofas, fresh orchids in a crystal vase, floor-to-ceiling windows that led to a private terrace where the ocean stretched out, infinite and blue. I placed my handbag down carefully, as if entering a scene from someone else's life. The concierge arrived within minutes. A young man, impeccable uniform, courteous to the point of deference. Welcome, Miss Vance. I'm Thomas. I will be your personal concierge for the voyage. May I assist with your luggage? I was taken aback. I believe I can handle it. He smiled. Of course. Should you require anything at all, simply dial 0. Dining preferences, private tours, in-suite service. We are here to ensure your journey is memorable. Memorable. That was a word I hadn't heard directed at me in a genuine way for a very long time. Not since my husband was gone. After he departed, I stepped onto the terrace. The sea breeze brushed against my face, lifting wisps of my hair. I shut my eyes and leaned against the railing, just inhaling. No tasks, no babysitting, no borrowed plans. Just me, this immense expanse of ocean, and the quiet certainty that no one expected me to be here. For lunch, I bypassed the buffet, my usual destination on past family holidays. I went to the adults-only restaurant where a pianist played gentle jazz and servers refilled water glasses unprompted. The maître d' led me to a window table, without a moment's pause. A couple across from me murmured when I took my seat, smiling. The chairman's suite, I heard the woman say, her voice awestruck. I feigned ignorance. I didn't know what they saw in me. Perhaps someone who belonged. The idea was more startling than it should have been. I ordered the pan-seared scallops and a crisp glass of wine, savoring each bite slowly, allowing the flavors to linger. There were no requests from children, no inquiries about when I would be finished, no one drumming a spoon on the table, hurrying me through my own afternoon. After my meal, I strolled the upper decks, not aimlessly, but with a sense of discovery, a spa on the 12th floor, a library hidden behind a cocktail bar. I went by the children's water park and saw my grandson, Oliver, pulling at Catherine's sleeve. She looked agitated, her sun hat askew. Samuel, my son, was in a dispute with a crew member, pointing toward a heap of jumbled luggage. They didn't notice me. I kept walking. By the time they reached their stateroom, cramped, interior, without a view, I was already back on my terrace with a plate of fresh fruit and a selection of P.D. James mysteries I had brought along. I began with an unsuitable job for a woman. Fitting, I mused. That evening, I got ready for the captain's welcome reception, not from a sense of duty, but from desire. I put on the dark green silk blouse I'd purchased and never found the courage to wear, paired with trousers that still fit perfectly, a pearl bracelet, a touch of lipstick. I gazed in the mirror and saw a person I hadn't recognized in ages. Not glamorous, perhaps, but decidedly there. The ballroom was bustling with laughter, the chime of glasses, and the murmur of well-dressed people enjoying the night. I found a seat near the back to simply observe. The captain eventually took the stage, raising a glass to the assembly. "To our passengers in the grand suites," he announced, "thank you for sailing with us. And to our guest in the chairman's suite, Miss Vance, we trust you will find this journey to your satisfaction." Head swiveled politely. I smiled and gave a single nod, a few intrigued looks, a glass raised in my direction. It wasn't a spectacle. It wasn't boisterous, but it was acknowledged. Later that night, back in the suite, I drew the curtains wide and left the glass doors open to the sea air. I drank peppermint tea on the deck in a plush robe, my bare toes against the cool tile. Far below, the ship glided like a whisper through the night. I didn't know what the next day held, whether they would see me, whether the charade would shatter. But for this moment, I possessed a profound peace, and I wasn't sharing it. Not yet. I awoke to the sound of the ocean exhaling, that steady, timeless rhythm just outside the glass. The sky was still a soft gray, the world barely awake. For the first time in ages, I hadn't set an alarm. My body simply sensed it had rested completely. No rapping on the door, no morning rush, just light, water, and a feeling akin to liberation. I brewed myself coffee from the small machine on the counter, deciphering its flashing lights like a small enigma. The beans were freshly ground, the cream authentic. I carried my cup outside, sat on the terrace wrapped in my robe, and watched the sunrise over the horizon, golden, soft, and warm. The ocean was indifferent to my age, to how many people had dismissed me. It didn't demand I hurry or be quieter. Somewhere on a lower deck, I pictured Kate telling Ollie to be still while she applied sunscreen to Chloe's face. Samuel would be fixated on his phone, checking work messages. Even out here, it was his nature, always attempting to manage the unmanageable. I had tried to teach him better, or so I had believed. I didn't let the thought linger. After breakfast, brought to my suite hot and flawlessly arranged, I chose to visit the art gallery. It was a tranquil space, located near the wine bar. A woman around my age was contemplating a large abstract canvas. She glanced my way and smiled. "Can you make anything of it?" she inquired. "I see a struggle," I replied. "Or perhaps the resolution of one." She laughed gently. "That's more than I could find." Her name was Helen, a widow like me from Washington, traveling on her own. We explored the gallery together, discussing the sorts of truths women only voice after living long enough to stop mincing words. Her son had pleaded with her not to come. "You'll be exhausted, Mom. It's a long trip, perhaps next year." "That's what made me book it," she confessed, out of sheer defiance. "I like you already," I admitted. We made plans to attend the dance class that afternoon. I hadn't danced since community gatherings in the 90 seconds. I nearly canceled, telling myself my joints were too stiff, that I would make a fool of myself. But at 2 o'clock, I was there. The instructor was a charismatic man from Cuba who possessed enough charm to fill the entire room. He partnered with each of us, demonstrating slow salsa steps with patience and light-hearted encouragement. Helen winked at me as I spun, clumsy yet balanced. My body complained, but my spirit soared. It felt wonderful. Unfamiliar, but wonderful. The family, I discovered later, had missed their excursion. A couple at a nearby table during dinner were discussing it. Some poor family was left behind. The woman remarked. Apparently, their child had a tantrum, and they had to rearrange their whole day. I took a sip of my wine, Back in my suite, I drew a bath in the immense marble tub and soaked until my skin was as wrinkled as fine tissue. I thought of my family's tiny cabin, how the children must be jumping on the beds, Samuel checking his schedule, Catherine quietly seething that things were not going perfectly. I felt no remorse. It wasn't that I didn't love them. I did. But that love had become frayed in recent years, stretched thin like worn-out elastic. They loved the version of me who was convenient, available, and unseen, unless required. Now, I was none of those things. After my bath, I put on my cotton nightgown, pulled the blankets up high, and resumed my book. Adam Dalgleish was close to revealing the murderer when I heard voices from outside, faint, muffled by the wall. My suite shared a thin partition with the next. Through it, I heard the distinct giggle of a child. Oliver. I went still. I had forgotten. I hadn't verified their deck assignment, but it was common sense that families with young children weren't given suites on the upper levels. They would be somewhere below, but if the kids' club activities extended to adjacent floors, they could be nearby, too nearby. I dimmed the lights, went to the door, and looked through the peephole. My heart pounding. The hallway was empty. Of course, I was being irrational. There were 3,000 people on this vessel. It was a mere coincidence. Yet, I felt the initial stirrings of risk. Let them discover me, a part of me thought. Let them knock and demand how I got here. Let them squirm. But another part, the deeper, more reserved part, wanted a little more time. Just one more day of being unnoticed, of being more than a backdrop to someone else's life. So, I remained silent. I let the ship sail on. Let them believe I was at home, knitting by the window, awaiting their photos. I had no desire to be anyone's shadow, ever again. The fourth morning arrived with silver clouds draped low over the sky, the kind that suggest rain but seldom deliver at sea. I draped a shawl over my shoulders and stepped onto the terrace, watching the horizon dissolve into mist. We were somewhere between Barbados and Antigua, somewhere distant enough. At last, from everything that had once held me, room service came with a polite knock. Fresh papaya, warm croissants, perfectly steeped tea. Thomas, ever the professional, checked if I required anything for the day. There is a wine tasting this afternoon, miss. Vance, and a jazz ensemble in the Meridian Bar tonight. If you wish, I can arrange a front row table for you. I nearly declined. The voice of old habits whispered that I should remain unseen, but I silenced it. Yes, please, I said, for both. An excellent selection, he smiled. Oh, and your laundry has been returned. Pressed and folded as you asked. I thanked him and waited for the door to close before I laughed aloud. Pressed and folded. When was the last time someone had done something for me without expecting something in return? Not since the hospital, I supposed, when Samuel had arrived late with a single rose and a Bluetooth earpiece still in his ear. I shut the sliding door and went to organize the clean clothes. My navy jumpsuit was hanging, smooth and immaculate. Not a single crease. I laid it carefully on the bed, considering it for the jazz performance. Just then, I heard a knock, not on my door, but on the one next to it. I froze. A familiar voice muffled through the wall. Room service for the Vance party, Catherine. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. It all made sense now. I hadn't considered the suite's proximity to others when I booked, only wanting solitude and space. But of course, they must have been upgraded when their original cabin was unavailable. These things occurred, and of all the rooms on this floating metropolis, destiny had placed them right beside me. For several minutes, I just sat there, my heart thumping. I could hear her speaking to Oliver, asking him to use his indoor voice. I heard Chloe's small feet pattering across the floor, followed by the unmistakable sound of a spill. Catherine sighed. Not a dramatic sigh, just a weary one. I should have felt triumphant. I should have smirked at the poetic justice, but I didn't. I felt empty. When had we become strangers, sharing a wall? Later that afternoon, I stepped out of my suite just as Samuel rounded the corner with a towel over his shoulder. I instinctively averted my face, fumbling with my room key as if I were just another passenger. He didn't look my way, didn't even slow his pace. I watched him disappear down the corridor. Back in my room, I examined my reflection. Lipstick faded, gray hair in a simple knot. Unremarkable. Just an older woman on a ship of strangers. I nearly teared up, but held back. At the wine tasting, I met a couple from Boston, retirees who had sold their home to spend their later years at sea. "We don't see the children much these days," the husband said with a shrug. "They're always so busy." We stopped waiting. I nodded. "We used to feel guilty," his wife added. "Now we just feel content." I chuckled softly. "I'm learning." The jazz trio played Brubeck and Fitzgerald, and I let the music wash over me like a warm shower. I sat in the front, by myself, but not lonely. Across the room, I spotted Helen again, wearing a striking red scarf and a broad smile. She wiggled her fingers at me. "Do you dance?" She mouthed during a break. "I used to." "Well, tonight you will again." And I did. We laughed and swayed, stumbled and steadied each other. For a moment, I wasn't 81. I was just Eleanor, a woman remembering what it felt like to be moved. Back in my suite, I changed into my robe, put my book down, and went out to the terrace. The sea was dark and studded with stars. The ship moved steadily beneath me. Next door, the lights were still on. I could hear them talking, not arguing, not laughing, just the low, tired murmur of a family navigating another day. I leaned on the railing, inhaling the salty air. Let them be close. Let them remain oblivious. For now, I required no confrontation, no acknowledgement. Just one more night under the stars in a space I had chosen, on a course that was finally my own. The rain began some time before dawn, gentle at first, then persistent, tapping on the glass like a polite visitor, asking to be let in. I woke up before my alarm, though none was set. Back home, my mornings began with Ollie's cartoons, or the clatter of the mail slot. But here, on the 5th morning of my clandestine journey, only the rain and the groaning ship roused me. I didn't draw the curtains immediately, just lay in bed beneath the heavy, crisp covers, observing the gray light filter through the drapes. I pictured Catherine trying to entertain the children indoors, and Samuel complaining about the canceled island tour. The ship's itinerary, resting in a leather folder in my suite, indicated we were to anchor off Antigua by noon. But in this weather, it seemed unlikely. I wasn't bothered. I had no intention of going ashore anyway. Everything I needed was right here. After a long shower, longer than I ever permitted myself at home with the perpetually dripping faucet and the guilt of the water bill, I dressed in a soft linen blouse and trousers. I wove my hair into a loose braid, fastening it with a simple clip. No one would be looking. I preferred it that way. Thomas arrived with my breakfast, his cheerfulness a contrast to the gray sky. "Miss Vance," he said, presenting the tray. "We have cinnamon rolls today, fresh from the oven. The chef recalled you mentioning them on our first day." I blinked. "I did?" He grinned. "Indeed. You said, 'I haven't had a truly good one since 1992. He considered it a personal challenge. I laughed, astonished. "Well, we'll see if he's succeeded." I accepted the tray and sat by the window as the sky darkened to a charcoal smudge. Rain streaked across the balcony glass in elegant sweeps. The pastry was exquisite, warm, flaky, and perfectly sweet. I ate it slowly, piece by piece, feeling more genuinely cared for in that moment than I had in years. Later, I roamed the ship once more. The corridors were more subdued on rainy days, with most passengers in their cabins watching films or murmuring in quiet disputes behind closed doors. I passed the Children's Activity Center and paused, hearing Chloe's distinct voice, high-pitched, inquisitive, always questioning why. I peeked through the porthole window just long enough to see her on a bright blue mat, a crayon in her hand. Ollie was beside her, focused on a drawing. The young woman supervising them wore a broad smile that I knew from experience would be gone by the third hour. I continued on. In the main atrium, they were offering complimentary tea and board games. I joined a table where two older women were playing Scrabble, debating whether quo was a valid word. "It is," I offered. We all laughed. I stayed for an hour, not because the conversation was riveting, it wasn't, but because it reminded me of something I had long since given up, simply sitting with others. No purpose, no expectations, just the gentle comfort of shared time. After lunch, the rain subsided. I returned to my suite and opened the terrace door. The air was heavy and moist, the sea calm once more. I sat with a novel and read for 3 chapters before I noticed how profoundly quiet it had become. Then I heard the knock not at my door, but the one next to it. I couldn't resist. I moved silently toward the shared wall and pressed my ear against it. Samuel's voice, strained and low. "We need a new plan." "She isn't answering. And they won't let us rebook without a fee." "Kate, I told you we shouldn't have relied on the tour desk. We aren't priority guests." "Sam, don't begin." A silence. Then, Oliver. "I miss Grandma." Catherine's sigh was audible. "She's at home, darling. We'll see her after the trip." Another silence. Then, "Chloe, she isn't home. I saw her." My heart stopped. Samuel laughed. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Chloe again. "I saw her. The woman on the terrace. The really big one. She looks like Grandma." Catherine's tone lowered. "That's impossible, sweetheart." I pulled back from the wall, my chest vibrating in a way it hadn't in years, not with fear, but something adjacent to it, a tremor of discovery. I pressed my palms flat on the cool marble counter. Let them wonder, let them speculate. I had nothing to justify. That evening, I bypassed the main dining room and had dinner brought to my suite. Duck confit with roasted potatoes, and a glass of red wine that warmed me more than any apology ever could. I watched the ocean in silence. They might suspect, they might not. But I was no longer concealing myself. Not from them, and not from myself. The next day dawned crisp and luminous, as if the storm had polished the sky. I opened the terrace doors to a breeze scented with salt and sundae. In the distance, I heard the sound of children laughing and a deck chair being dragged across the tiles. The ship was alive, and so was I. I dressed unhurriedly. Simple cotton trousers, a sea green blouse, and the fine leather sandals I seldom wore at home, worried they were too elegant for the supermarket. Here, there was no supermarket. Here, I could dress for myself. Thomas had left a note with my breakfast. "Invitations to the chef's table are available for this evening. Would you like me to reserve a place for you, Miss Vance?" I wrote back, "Yes, please. One guest." I paused for a moment before adding the final word. The day passed gently. I walked along the upper decks, stopping to read the signs by the shuffleboard court, observing the younger passengers emerge from the smoothie bar in sandals and swimwear. their faces bright with Sunday. No one gave me a second glance, and I cherished it. It reminded me of something I had almost forgotten: how to exist without needing to explain myself. By early afternoon, I had made my way to the stern of the ship and found a small, secluded lounge that was nearly deserted. Just a man in a linen fedora reading a newspaper and two women playing cards in silence. I ordered an iced tea and sat in a chair by the window, letting the vastness of the ocean fill my view. It was there, immersed in that tranquility, that I heard the voice. "Grandma." I turned slowly. Oliver stood at the entrance, holding a battered deck of cards, blinking as if he couldn't believe I was real. I smiled softly. "Hello, my dear." He didn't move, didn't run to me or call out, just stared, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly agape. "Are you?" he whispered. "Are you here by yourself?" "I am," I said gently. "And so are you, at the moment." He glanced over his shoulder. "We're supposed to be finding the game room. Mom and Dad are arguing again. She said the tours were a disaster and the dinner reservations were wrong, and—" He stopped fidgeting. "They're upset a lot." I reached into my purse, found a wrapped caramel, and held it out to him. He came forward, took it without a word, and sat down beside me. We remained like that for a while. He asked no questions, and I offered no justifications. Sometimes, quiet company is enough. When the caramel was gone, he looked up. "I miss you," I swallowed. "I miss you too. Are you coming to dinner with us?" "Not tonight," I said, "but you are always welcome to visit me here." "Okay," he murmured. Then a look of worry crossed his face. "Should I tell them I found you?" I smiled. "Only if you wish to." He nodded slowly, as if committing a great secret to memory, then hopped down from the chair. "I'll go find the game room." Before I could stop myself, I said, "Ollie." He turned. "Tell Chloe I love her drawings, even the ones on napkins." His face broke into a wide grin, and then he was gone. I remained in the lounge a little longer, my heart still trying to catch up. I should have felt anxious. The facade was cracking, my privacy eroding, but I didn't. Something about Oliver's quiet acceptance calmed me. Back in my suite, I confirmed with Thomas that I would be attending the chef's dinner. Just one, no companions. That evening, I wore the soft lavender blouse I had been saving for an unspecified special occasion. Pearl earrings, the kind no one had remarked on in years. The table was long and elegant, set with name cards and gleaming silverware. There were 8 of us in total. A retired surgeon, 2 women from Quebec, a couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and a man in his mid-60s with dark, observant eyes and a journalist's quiet demeanor, who introduced himself as Julian. "I haven't seen you at many of the ship's events," he remarked after the first course. "I've been in hiding," I replied. He smiled. "From whom?" "Everyone." A noble pursuit. The meal lasted over 2 hours. Pan-seared scallops with a saffron sauce, duck confit, a towering creation of chocolate and pistachio. The wine was plentiful, the laughter genuine. As dessert was served, the journalist leaned in. "You're not really hiding," he said. "You're waiting." That night, standing barefoot on my terrace as the moon cut a shimmering path across the water, I finally understood. It wasn't triumph or resentment I felt, but something softer, a sense of readiness. They could find me. They could question me. They could dismantle the silence I had so carefully constructed, and I would not retreat. It was nearly noon when I saw them, the entire family on the midship observation deck, huddled around a map of the next port of call. Catherine held a guidebook open like a shield. Samuel was pointing at something with a pen, his other hand occupied with a walkie-talkie from the kids' club. Chloe was leaning over the railing, her face to the wind. "Oliver," I noted. stood a little apart from the rest. They hadn't seen me. I was 3 decks above them, concealed behind a tinted glass panel near the quiet sunning area. I watched them without any sense of guilt, slowly sipping a grapefruit soda as if it were a rare vintage. They looked exhausted, not just from the usual vacation weariness of sunburns and sugar highs, but from something deeper, as if the strain of maintaining appearances had finally begun to show. They had changed their attire again. Catherine was wearing a loose-fitting top and sandals she would never have worn back home, a concession to practicality. Samuel's shirt was creased, his jaw tight. I could see it even from this distance, the subtle signs of a man struggling to keep up a performance. And yet, as I observed them from my hidden vantage point, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt something far more complex. Back in the suite, I called Thomas and asked him to retract my dinner plans. "Is everything all right, Miss Vance?" he asked, his voice as warm as ever. "Everything is perfectly fine," I said. "I believe I just need a quiet evening." Instead, I went for a walk. Not the usual manicured promenade stroll, but down to the lower decks where fewer people ventured. Past the laundry chutes, the staff mess hall, and the humble little bistro tucked behind the art gallery that no one ever seemed to notice. I ordered black tea and settled into a corner booth with my book. 2 pages in, I felt someone slide into the seat across from me. It was Helen. "Playing hide and seek," she said with a smile. "I'm recharging," I corrected. "There's a distinction," she chuckled. "I heard you made quite an impression at the chef's dinner. Julian said you silenced a brash Texan with a single sentence about foie gras, and it was the highlight of his voyage." "He said that?" I blinked. I didn't even realize he was listening. Oh, he was," she said. And so was the rest of the table. We drank our tea in a comfortable silence. At one point, she reached across and patted my hand. "You know," she said, her voice softer now, "I saw a boy, your grandson, I believe, coming out of the game room yesterday. He looked as though he'd been holding his breath." "Ollie," I murmured, "he saw you." "He did. And he honored your privacy." She nodded. "Good boy." Later, I wandered back upstairs just in time for the start of a movie night on the deck. Some whimsical animated feature. Blankets, bean bags, hot chocolate. Families gathered in small groups. Teenagers attempting to look disconnected from their parents. I slipped into a chaise lounge near the back. And there they were again. My family. Catherine was adjusting Chloe's blanket. Samuel had a box of popcorn propped on his knee. Ollie sat between them, unusually quiet. Halfway through the film, Ollie stood up and walked away. I followed at a distance. He went toward the port side stairs, down 1 level, then stopped, turned, and saw me. We didn't speak. He walked toward me, silent, and then did something I hadn't expected. He hugged me. No words, just his arms tight around my waist, his face buried in my blouse. I held him, my hand resting on his hair. After a long moment, he pulled away. "They're a bit of a disaster," he said, stating it as a simple fact. "I know. I told Chloe you're here. She says you're magic." I laughed. "She might be right." He grinned, a tooth missing. "I don't want to go home." "You don't have to just yet." He looked up. "Are you angry with them?" "No," I said honestly. "Just weary." He nodded. "Me too." When he turned to leave, I let him go. Back in my suite, I sat with the lights off, listening to the slow, deep breath of the ocean. No calls, no knocks, just the quiet reverberation of my grandson's small truth. They're a bit of a disaster. We all are, I thought. Some of us just learn to conceal it better. The next encounter was not by design, but then again, nothing truly significant ever is. It was the morning of our stop in Antigua. I hadn't signed up for the snorkeling. I had no fondness for fish or for rubber flippers that chafe your ankles. Instead, I was having breakfast alone in the Solarium Bistro, a peaceful, glass-enclosed space high above the churning sea. I was halfway through my toast when I heard Samuel's voice. "Excuse me, is there still time to sign up? We were on the wait list yesterday." I froze. The bistro wasn't exclusive. It was open to all, technically for adults only, but the rule was loosely enforced. I drew back in my chair, shifting my body toward the window. My reflection was a faint outline in the glass. A woman in pale blue with pearl earrings, sipping tea as if the world beyond did not exist. I heard footsteps draw near, then halt. A silence, followed by an intake of breath. Mom. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I could feel his gaze on the back of my head, as if he were unsure whether I was real or a phantom summoned by guilt and sea air. I calmly reached for my cup. "Mom," he repeated, softer this time. I turned, slowly. Our eyes met. There was no cinematic swell of music, no dramatic gasp, just two people who had not truly looked at each other for a very long time. "Samuel," I said with a nod, polite, composed. He blinked. "You're here." So it would appear. But he was flustered. You said you weren't coming." "No," I corrected, setting my cup down with care. "I said nothing. You presumed." His face reddened, not with embarrassment, but with frustration. Kate and I thought you would be more comfortable at home." "More convenient, you mean?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The bistro had fallen quieter. The patrons nearest us had lowered their voices. I stood, smoothing the front of my blouse. "I will be in my suite," I said evenly. "If you wish to speak privately." He hesitated, then nodded. I walked away without waiting to see if he would follow. Back in suite 1501, I paced, not with anxiety but just to keep my thoughts in motion. I replayed each word, each inflection. I should have been trembling. I was not. There was a knock. He entered cautiously, like a man approaching a witness stand. "It's nice," he said, looking around the suite. "It is mine," I replied. He looked at me then, and for an instant, I saw my son. Not the man with graying hair and a tense jaw, but the boy who had once clutched my hand on his first day of school, his knuckles white with fear. "I had no idea." "No," I said, "because you never asked." A pause. "I suppose I just assumed you wouldn't want to travel by yourself." I raised an eyebrow. "That I wouldn't appreciate the ocean or the sun or a glass of wine on a quiet terrace." He sank into a chair. "It's not like that. No, from where I am sitting, Samuel, it is exactly like that. You planned a family vacation. You told everyone it was all-inclusive. You told the children I would be happier at home. You didn't invite. You didn't inquire. You decided." He was silent, his hands clenching and unclenching in his lap. "Ollie found me," I added. "He didn't say much, just sat with me for a while." Samuel looked up. "He mentioned seeing you." I didn't believe him. "No," I said, "because it didn't fit the narrative." He winced. "I'm sorry." I believed him. That much was true. He meant it. But an apology is just a word. It requires action to give it weight. "I'm not angry," I said after a moment. "Not truly. Just finished accepting this as my due." He nodded slowly. "I understand." I doubted he did. Not completely, but perhaps for the first time. He wanted to. "Mom," he said quietly, "why didn't you tell us you were coming? That you booked this?" I smiled. "Because it was not your permission I needed." He stayed for another 10 minutes, making small talk about the weather, the children, the lobster buffet that was apparently not worth the hype. And then he stood, hesitating. "Will you join us for dinner tonight?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He left without another word. I stood at the window and watched him disappear down the hall. Not victorious, not sorrowful, simply complete. That evening, I didn't get ready for dinner. I didn't style my hair or apply lipstick. I wore my soft cashmere sweater and thick socks and ate mushroom soup from a wide porcelain bowl, watching the sea glide by in the quiet. No music, no calls, no one needing anything from me. For the first time in decades, I was not playing a part. Samuel's visit had dislodged something, not anger, but clarity. The man I had raised stood before me, offering apologies like a boy who had shattered a vase and couldn't quite grasp the consequences. And I felt a strange sense of peace afterward, as if I had finally relinquished a burden that was never mine to bear. Later that night, the ship hosted a masquerade ball, a lavish affair in the grand ballroom. A live orchestra, champagne fountains, women in glittering gowns and feathered masks. I nearly skipped it, nearly stayed in with my book and my tea, and let the evening pass. But something within me stirred. Not pride, not defiance, just a flicker of curiosity. I dressed slowly. The dark navy gown I had packed for an unknown occasion, with sleeves that billowed like silk smoke, a velvet mask from a shipboard boutique, deepest violet. I swept my hair up, slipped into low heels, and looked at my reflection unfamiliar, and at last, completely myself. The ballroom was a sea of gold and silver. Musicians played swing music. Waiters drifted through the crowd with trays. I stood near the back at first, sipping sparkling cider, unseen in the swirl of motion. Then, a tap on my shoulder. "May I have this dance?" It was Julian, the journalist from the chef's dinner, in a tailored black suit and a half mask that lent him an air of sharp mischief. I nodded. We danced, slowly at first, then with more confidence. I laughed as he spun me gently. He didn't ask probing questions, didn't offer empty compliments. He simply moved with me, as if we had done this 100 times before. "You don't strike me as someone who hides," he said during a pause. I did, for a long time. And now I have remembered how to occupy a room. He tilted his head. "I would argue you never forgot." At one point, I stepped away to catch my breath. And that's when I saw them, Samuel and Catherine, standing near the entrance. No masks, no pretense, just watching. They hadn't seen me yet. Ollie stood between them, holding Chloe's hand, his eyes scanning the crowd with a child's urgency. I recognized the need to find a familiar face in a world that suddenly feels overwhelming. And then, his eyes found mine. His face lit up. He whispered something to his sister, and she tugged on Catherine's sleeve, pointing. Catherine turned. Her mouth fell open. I stood my ground. Samuel followed her gaze, his jaw tightening slightly. A reflex, I suppose. He raised a hand, uncertainly. Not quite a wave. Not yet. More of a question. I gave a single, deliberate nod. Then I turned back to Julian, who was approaching with 2 flutes of champagne, one real, one cider. He handed me the latter with a grin. "Whoever they are," he said quietly, "they look as if they've just been reminded that you're not invisible." "I was never invisible," I replied. They simply stopped looking. The music changed. Another slow dance. "Care for one more?" he asked. I took his hand. Over his shoulder I could see Samuel and Catherine, still watching, unsure whether to approach, whether to intrude on something they clearly hadn't expected. They didn't move. I was grateful. Let them remain in the doorway for once. Let them experience what it feels like to be the ones left on the outside, wondering. We danced until the music softened and the crowd began to disperse. Julian gave a slight bow, kissed my knuckles, an old-fashioned, charming, and entirely unnecessary gesture. I walked back to my suite alone, mask in one hand, shoes in the other. On the terrace, I stood barefoot beneath the stars. I had been seen, and I had orchestrated the moment myself. The morning after the masquerade, I woke with a strange sensation in my chest. Not a weight, exactly, but a fullness, as if a long-shuttered room inside me had finally been opened to the air. The mask lay on the nightstand where I had left it, velvet and ribbon, still carrying the faint scent of Julian's cologne and my own perfume. I touched it for a moment, then turned away. No need to dwell on metaphors. It had done its job. I had worn it, danced in it, and most importantly, taken it off on my own terms. Thomas brought breakfast as usual: fresh coffee, 2 poached eggs, and a slice of sourdough so perfectly toasted it nearly brought tears to my eyes. "You were breathtaking last night," he said as he poured my coffee. "They are still talking about you in the dining room this morning." "Oh, I'm sure they are," I smiled. Nothing more scandalous on a ship than an old woman enjoying herself. He chuckled, but there was a genuine warmth in his eyes. Not the patronizing kind, but the kind that truly sees you. When he had gone, I took my plate out to the balcony. The sea was calm, almost like glass, and the sky was that pale early morning blue that seems to be holding its breath. And that's when I heard the knock. Not at my door, the one next door. Then, voices. Not sharp this time, not frustrated, soft, deliberate. She was dancing with that man. Everyone saw. "I know, Kate." And she looked different. A pause. "I know." Silence. "She's not going to just fall back into her old role when we get home, is she?" More silence. Then Samuel's voice. "I don't think she should." I froze, the toast halfway to my lips. It was the first time I had heard that tone from him, a mixture of regret and something like awe, as if he had seen a glimpse of me he couldn't quite comprehend. I went inside quietly, closing the balcony door. I didn't need to hear any more. That afternoon, I took a long stroll along the main deck. People nodded as I passed, not necessarily because they remembered me from the ball, but because I moved differently now, shoulders back, gaze steady, the way women do when they recall they are not meant to be put aside. I passed the ship's boutique and saw Helen through the window, trying on a wide-brimmed sun hat. I went inside and tilted my head. "Too much?" she asked. "Not nearly enough," I said. "Try the crimson one." She laughed and signaled to the sales clerk. We walked to the lounge for afternoon tea together, 2 women of a certain age moving with the quiet confidence of those with nothing left to prove. As we settled into a booth, I saw Ollie across the atrium, sitting with Chloe at a table scattered with puzzle pieces. He looked up, met my eyes, and raised a hand in his understated way, barely shoulder height, just enough to say, "I see you." I raised my hand in return. Catherine came around the corner, saw us, and paused. She didn't approach, but she gave a small nod. It was sufficient. That night, I dressed without ceremony. The navy jumpsuit again, the one that draped just so when I walked. I hadn't intended to go to the gala dinner, but Julian had left a note with Thomas that morning. "If you've grown tired of dancing with yourself, I will be near the champagne fountain." I went. The dining hall was a symphony of light and linen, filled with the low hum of contentment. Waiters moved like a flowing river. A string quartet played something I didn't recognize, but it fit the mood perfectly. Julian was already there, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "I thought I might find you here," he said. "You're persistent." He smiled. I'm curious. We didn't dance that night. We just talked about books, about places we had yet to visit, about how aging can make your world feel smaller until you remember you hold the pen to redraw the map. At one point, I noticed Samuel watching us from across the room. His expression wasn't wounded or confused. It was contemplative, as if he were observing a stranger and trying to decide if he wanted to make her acquaintance. When I got back to my suite, a note had been slipped under the door in Samuel's handwriting. Can we have breakfast? Just you and me. No agendas, no apologies, just coffee and a little time. S. I stood holding it for a long while. Then I folded it, placed it beside the velvet mask, and switched off the light. It wasn't a refusal, but a choice. For the first time in my life, I wanted to be the sole author of my own mornings. The next morning, I didn't reply to the note. Not out of spite, not to teach a lesson. I simply wasn't ready. I had spent most of my adult life responding on command to the phone, the doorbell, a child's cry, a husband's sigh, the relentless cascade of small needs and medium-sized demands. I had answered, even when silence would have been wiser, even when I was exhausted to my bones, even when no one had bothered to ask if I wanted to. So, no, I did not answer. I went for a walk instead. Deck 6, port side, the quiet side, where the shuffleboard courts were deserted and the lifeboats hung in neat orange rows like well-behaved commas. I walked with my hands clasped behind my back, slow and deliberate, the way my grandfather used to on Sunday afternoons. This wasn't about exercise. It was about stillness. I passed a man napping under a towel, a crew member polishing a railing, a couple murmuring in Italian. I stopped to gaze at the horizon. It was a pale silver line today, the kind that makes you believe the world might still be capable of grace. Then I turned, and he was there, Samuel, not dressed up, just in shorts and a faded t-shirt, a coffee in one hand, the other pushed deep into his pocket as if he didn't know what to do with it. He didn't speak at first. Neither did I. We just stood there, two people suspended in the space between what was and what is. This isn't how I intended things to be, he said at last. I nodded. I know. I didn't realize. He trailed off, then gave a short, dry laugh. I never realized how much we had confined your world. I blinked. The words weren't accusatory, but they touched something raw inside me. You didn't confine it, I said. I allowed it to contract. Every time I said yes when I meant no. Every time I opted for silence. He looked down. I thought I was helping. I know, I said. And I thought I was loving you by remaining useful. We stood in the quiet wind, gulls circling high above. Then he said, You were right not to tell us you were coming. You deserved this for yourself. I didn't thank him. It didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like a truth, finally voiced. You and Kate? I asked gently. Are you all right? He offered a tired smile. We're figuring it out. Vacations don't solve anything. They just illuminate the cracks. I looked at him, this man I had raised who now so resembled his father when life had worn him down, and I felt a strange pang, not of regret, but of distance. Of time passed, and paths diverged. Ollie and Chloe, I said. They are good children. They are kind. He nodded. They adore you. I adore them. A pause. I don't know how to fix any of this, he said quietly. You don't have to, I replied. You just have to see it. Truly see it. That is the beginning. He nodded again, slowly. I'll let you be, he said then, and turned to leave. But before he walked away, I touched his arm. Samuel. He looked back. Perhaps breakfast tomorrow. His smile was small, but it reached his eyes. I'll be there. That night, I sat on the terrace in my robe, knees hugged to my chest, hands cradling a mug of peppermint tea. The ship glided gently beneath me, and for once, I didn't feel as though I were struggling to keep up. I felt a sense of wholeness, and tomorrow I would meet my son for breakfast. Not because he required my presence, but because I had chosen it. We met at 8 a.m. I selected a corner table by the window, one with plush cushions and a view of the boundless blue, not too close to the buffet line, not hidden in the shadows. I wanted light. I wanted space. Samuel arrived on time, holding 2 cups of coffee and looking as though he hadn't slept well. He placed one in front of me. "Still with a splash of cream?" "I still do," I said. He smiled. We sipped in silence for a few moments. Ships are well suited for silence. There is always the low thrum of the engines, the whisper of water against the hull, the distant chime of silverware. The quiet never feels empty, only still. Eventually, he spoke. "I don't understand how you kept this from us. You made it easy," I said, without malice. He winced. "I mean that," I added. "You were so certain I wouldn't come. You never called to check, never asked if I'd had a change of heart. You stated your position that I would slow you down, and that was the end of it." He didn't contest it, just stirred his coffee with a small wooden stick, the sound quiet between us. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I know you've heard it before, but I am." I nodded. "I believe you. And I also know it will require more than words." He looked up, and I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not guilt, but acknowledgement. "I think I started seeing you as a permanent fixture," he said, "like a landmark. Always there, always a given. You've been doing so much for so long, I forgot it was a choice you were making." "It stopped feeling like a choice a long time ago," I said. "It just became a routine. Wake up, help with the children, be useful, be quiet, be grateful to be included." He looked down. "You deserved more." "I deserved to be asked," I said. "That's all. Not to be taken for granted, not to be assumed, just to be asked." A pause. The waiter arrived and took our orders: eggs for him, oatmeal and fruit for me. When he had gone, Samuel leaned forward. "The children know you're here now," he said. "Kate didn't want to tell them at first. She was embarrassed, I think. But they figured it out. Ollie was the first." "I know. He says you're a secret agent." Samuel smiled. "He said you're on a covert mission to teach us all a lesson." I chuckled. "Smart boy." He gazed out the window, then back at me. "What happens when we're back home?" I shrugged. "That depends on whether you truly mean it when you say you want things to be different. Because I do. I have lived more in these 12 days than I have in the last decade. I remembered who I was before I became convenient. I don't intend to forget her again." He nodded. "Then we will figure it out." Our food arrived. We ate quietly. I noticed he buttered his toast just as his father used to, too much in the center, nothing on the crusts. I hadn't seen him do that in years. After breakfast, we walked for a little while on the upper deck. We didn't talk much, just 2 people relearning the cadence of being in each other's company. I could feel a shift between us. Not a healing, not a resolution, but a softening. Before we parted, he stopped. "Will you come to dinner tonight?" he asked. "No grand affair, just the 5 of us. No speeches." I paused. Then, yes. His relief was palpable, but he contained it. Back in my suite, I stood before the mirror and looked at myself. The same wrinkles, the same hair pinned back with a clip, the same hands that had washed too many dishes and done too many favors. But my eyes, they were my own again. That evening, I knocked on their door for the first time. Suite 1503. Catherine opened it. She didn't speak immediately, but she stepped back and let me in. Ollie grinned. Chloe ran to give me a hug. Samuel was already pulling out a chair for me, and for the first time in a very long time, I took my place at their table, not as the assistant, not as the afterthought, but as myself. The dinner was simple. No white linen, no string quartets, just the five of us around a small, circular table, the kind where elbows occasionally touch and voices overlap. The children were still in their swimsuits, wrapped in thick towels, their hair damp from the pool. Catherine had arranged plates of room service pasta and small bottles of sparkling water with slices of lemon. I brought only myself. It was enough. Ollie sat next to me, leaning in as if to confirm I was real. Chloe climbed into my lap after 2 bites, her fingers sticky with tomato sauce. No one corrected her. No one told her to sit up straight. We were beyond that now, at least for this evening. Samuel poured water for everyone as if it were a fine vintage. Catherine folded napkins with a needless precision. She didn't look at me often, but when she did, her gaze wasn't sharp. It was tentative, careful. I could live with careful. It was an improvement on cold. We didn't talk about the cruise, or the suite, or the silence between us that had stretched on for so long it had nearly become a family heirloom. We talked about the next day's port, about the sea turtles Chloe hoped to see, about Ollie's new favorite fact, that a starfish can regrow a lost arm. And yet, beneath it all, the quiet tension remained, a delicate thread at the edge of the conversation, muted, but not gone. After dinner, Catherine began to gather the plates. I stood up to help out of sheer instinct, an old reflex. The helper in me still wired to move, but she stopped me. "I've got it," she said, not sharply, just firmly. Our eyes met. "All right," I said, and I sat back down. Later, Oliver insisted I stay to read his bedtime story. It was a peculiar little book about a badger who was a cartographer. Chloe fell asleep halfway through, her head resting on my arm. Ollie remained awake, his eyes fixed on my face more than the illustrations. "Will you be at breakfast with us tomorrow?" he asked quietly as I closed the book. "I believe I will." He nodded, solemn. "Good. You read the best." I smiled and kissed his forehead. Samuel walked me back toward my suite. Not all the way, just part of the way. We didn't speak. The ship was hushed now, the energy of the first few days having dissipated during the long stretches at sea. Before we reached my door, he stopped. "It should have been obvious sooner," he said. "What we were doing, how much we were taking for granted." "You were busy building your life," I said, "and I made it easy for you to forget I had one of my own." He nodded. "But you didn't lose it. You just put it on hold for us." "I put it on hold for too long," I said. "That part is on me." We stood there, the corridor lights casting a soft, low glow. Then he did something that surprised me. He reached out and embraced me. Not the quick, perfunctory hug I had become accustomed to, but a real one, the kind where someone holds on for just a moment longer than expected. I held him in return. For a second, I felt all the years between us dissolve: his first bicycle crash, his graduation day, the time he called from university, distraught over a failed exam. And then the moment passed. He stepped back. "Good night, Ma. Good night." In my suite, I stood barefoot on the balcony. The sea was a vast black canvas, but it didn't feel menacing, just open, endless, expectant, and I realized something. This journey hadn't been about revenge, or teaching a lesson, or proving I was still worth the price of a ticket. It was about returning to myself, and then choosing to stay there, We docked at the final port the next morning. The sun was hot and immediate, with a tropical intensity that made even the shadows seem vibrant. From my balcony, I watched the passengers disembark in a steady stream. Couples in matching sun hats, children skipping with excitement, older men complaining about the heat. I remained where I was. I had no interest in shore excursions or souvenir stalls, no desire to photograph another historic cannon or barter for a bracelet I would never wear. What I sought was right here, not in the destination, but in the quiet I had cultivated for myself. This peaceful suite, this constant view, this version of me who no longer waited for permission. By midday, the ship was nearly empty. Even Thomas was nowhere to be seen. I ordered a light lunch from the bistro and took it to the sun deck, the adults' only one, with plush loungers and no music, only the sound of the wind. Helen was already there, engrossed in a book. She looked up as I approached. Not exploring the town? I shook my head. And you? Please, she scoffed. Another market filled with painted coconuts? I've seen enough coconuts to last a lifetime. We sat together in the sun, mostly in silence. Just two women who had stopped making excuses for needing tranquility. After a while, she said, Julian told me you danced, like someone who had just remembered the music. I smiled. Perhaps I had. She closed her book. You know, I've been traveling on my own for 6 years now. At first it felt like a banishment. Then it felt like an escape. Now it just feels like living. I nodded. That's the transition, isn't it? When it stops being about running from something and starts being about arriving. She reached over and touched my arm. A brief, firm gesture. Whatever happens when you get back, don't let yourself become small again. I won't, I said, and I meant it. That evening, I returned to their suite, 1503. This time, I knocked. Catherine answered. She looked weary, but the brittleness was gone. She had pulled her hair back and taken off her makeup, and for the first time in years, she looked younger, not in chronology, but in her unguarded expression. She stepped aside. They're drawing, she said. Ollie wanted to show you something. The children were on the floor, surrounded by a rainbow of markers. Ollie held up a piece of folded paper. It's the cruise ship, he explained, but from your view. He had drawn the vessel from a top-down perspective. Balconies, swimming pools, the large movie screen on the upper deck, and in one corner, a large square labeled Grandma's Place, with a small figure standing on the balcony, waving at stick figures far below. She can see everything, he said with pride. Catherine knelt beside him. She does. Chloe climbed into my lap again without an invitation. We spent the evening like that, on the floor, surrounded by laughter, small voices, and warm hands. Catherine joined the circle, at first tentatively, then with ease. At one point, she handed me a mug of tea. I'm sorry, she said quietly, not just for the cruise, for how often I've allowed you to become invisible for our convenience. I didn't reply immediately. Then, thank you. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. Later, Samuel offered to walk me back again. I declined. I think I'll walk alone tonight, I said. Of course. As I stepped into the corridor, Oliver called out, Wait! He ran to me, arms outstretched, and hugged me tight. Will you come to the kids' talent show tomorrow? He asked. I'm going to read my poem about a kraken. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said. He grinned, already turning back toward the room. In the hallway, I walked slowly. The ship had a slow, rhythmic sway, the way it always did on the final night, as if it were already lamenting the departure of its passengers. Back in my suite, I poured myself one last glass of wine, not to celebrate, not to unwind, but simply to acknowledge the moment. Tomorrow, we would be at the dock. And the day after, we would all be back on solid ground, back to ordinary lives, to unopened mail and piles of laundry. But tonight, I was still here, precisely where I had chosen to be. Disembarkation day always follows a certain cadence. Hurried, restless, and final. Suitcases line the corridors, announcements echo from the speakers, and people queue for coffee they won't have time to finish. The vessel that had been a floating kingdom now felt like a transit lounge with a better view. I took my time. My luggage had been collected the night before, everything folded, zipped, and accounted for. Not because I was eager to depart, but because I had already packed the things that truly mattered, and they weighed nothing at all. They were in the quiet trust of a boy who drew me a place of my own, in the simple affection of a girl who climbed into my lap without asking, in the newfound respect of a son who had finally seen me not as an fixture, but as his mother, and in the woman who had finally stopped requesting space and had simply taken it. Thomas knocked once, as arranged. "Ready, Miss Vance?" I nodded. "Thank you for everything." He smiled, and he looked for a moment as if he wanted to say something more, but instead, he just nodded and wheeled the trolley down the hall. I stood at the doorway a moment longer, then turned and walked one last time through the quiet suite, my fingers brushing the cool marble counter, the soft fabric of the chair where I had read Adam Dalgleish and watched the sea. I stepped out onto the balcony. The port was already bustling with taxis and porters. I took a deep breath. The air here was heavier, tinged with the scent of diesel and warm asphalt, but I didn't mind. It signified a return. It signified a choice. I heard footsteps, then Samuel's voice. "They're holding a spot for us in Group 9. I turned. He stood beside Catherine, with Ollie between them and Chloe balanced on her hip. "We can wait," I said. He nodded. For a long second, none of us moved. Then Chloe wriggled down and reached for my hand. "I drew you again," she said. "But this time, you're in a garden, and you're wearing a crown." "Oh," I smiled. "What kind of garden?" "Oh, peas," she said seriously. "And mint, and zinnias. Sounds perfect." Ollie tugged on my sleeve. "Can we come visit your house soon? I want to see your real garden, not just the drawing." I knelt to meet his eyes. "You can come visit. But from now on, I'm not the designated cook. Understood?" He grinned. "Deal." Catherine stepped forward. There was something in her expression I hadn't seen in years. Not an apology, not even regret, just an open door. "I'd like to help," she said quietly, "if you'll let me." I held her gaze, then nodded. "We'll start small." Samuel checked his watch, then looked at me. "Are you okay?" "I'm good," I said. "Better then." We walked down the gangway together. No fanfare, no speeches, just the sound of the sea fading behind us and the scrape of suitcase wheels on concrete. Outside, the taxis were lined up like beetles. The sunlight was too bright. Everything felt too fast. And yet, I didn't feel left behind. I felt ready. As we reached the curb, Ollie turned to me. "You didn't seem old on the ship," he said. I blinked. "What do I seem now?" He shrugged. "Just tall." I laughed. We said our goodbyes with real hugs this time. Not the rushed, habitual kind, but the kind that lingers. I got into my own taxi, alone. As we pulled away, I didn't look back at the ship. I had already taken everything I needed. Back home, there would be bills to pay, groceries to buy, dust on the windowsills. But there would also be my garden, my own bed, my own pace, and no more asking to be seen. I had seen myself. That was the beginning of everything. If this story resonated with you, share it, save it. Perhaps someone you know needs a reminder that they are never invisible.